Hi, I'm Walter, and this is my 1989 Subaru Brumby, and that is a 2007 Outback 2.5. My plan is to take the engine and running gear out of that Outback and put it into my Brumby. I'm no mechanic and I want to have this legal for use on New Zealand roads, so there's going to be an awful lot for me to figure out along the way. However, what I want to get out of this is double the horsepower, permanent all-wheel drive, 5-speed manual with high and low ratio, better suspension, better brakes. So it's going to be quite the project. Come along with me and see how I get on. Okay, so at this point I thought I'd just give you a little bit of a backstory about the Brumby and my involvement with it. So I've always wanted one of these, and for me the key was that it had to have the quad headlights and the twin removable sunroofs, what's known as the Halo model. And this one popped up about 6 years ago on Facebook locally, reasonable price, went around and had a look at it. Body's pretty solid, engine pretty rattly. Car's done about 315,000 Ks or so, so worn out engine's probably not unexpected, and it's still got that death rattle 6 years later, hasn't let us down once. The usefulness of the Brumby is fantastic. Like, I have used this for so many missions, going off on adventures, doing jobs, building work, garden work, doing tip runs, picking up all sorts of items that probably shouldn't really go in the back of it, but we make it work. Like when we picked up our outdoor garden furniture, the box that came in hung over the back by quite a bit. Same thing with the toolboxes. When I picked up the roller cabinets for my workshop here, those also hung over the back quite a bit. I've had a large log in the back, one that I'd carved into a full-size throne, and this thing was used to carry that around. So it's had a lot of use, and we love it for that. We love going and getting firewood or whatever and just being able to throw it in the back. So I've gone through all the options. I've thought about turning into some sort of tyre slayer. I don't have the same budget as Travis Prestana or the same skill level, so that's sort of out for me. But I've also thought about doing off-road build and jacking it up on big monster suspension and all that sort of stuff. All of that would be very cool, but I still want to be able to use this as a Brumby, as a workhorse, like what it was actually intended to be used for. And for that purpose, it's actually tidy enough as it is. It's not mint. Some of the trim's not in good condition. There's a lot of cracks in the dash, although I do have a plan for that. There's a few bits around it where there's little dings and nicks and that sort of stuff. The person that I brought it off was using it for a lawn mowing business. At some point in the past, it's been used by a panel beating shop because under a certain light you can still see the outline of their logo down the side. So yeah, it's had a life before it's come to me, and as far as I'm concerned, that life's not over yet. So I'm not about to turn it into anything that's concourse condition or anything like that, because then I'll be too scared to throw firewood in the back of it. So what this is all about is making this a good driving Brumby. So taking the asthmatic 1.8 litre carburetted engine and replacing that with something that's about 20 years newer, fuel injected 2.5 litre with roughly double the horsepower. Same thing with the running gear. I like the high and low ratio in the Brumby, makes it very capable off-road. On-road, not so good, because on-road Brumbies are front-wheel drive, and as anyone will tell you, that's actually wrong-wheel drive. Part of the changes will be changing it over to more modern suspension in the front, maybe upgrading the dampers and stuff in the back while we're at it, putting bigger brakes on there, converting the rear from drums to discs. So again, that'll give us better braking performance, better on-road manners. It'll suit the power upgrade as well. So there's a lot that can be done to this without taking away the essence of what actually makes a Brumby, and that for me is the key to this build. So with all that said, let's get into it. Here we go. This is the donor vehicle's final drive under its own power. She's about to be stripped of every usable component, which is going to be a bit of a messy process, but it is the key to the whole build. So while I wait for the engine oil to drain, how about we go underneath the old girl and take a look at what's usable? You can see the engine actually doesn't look too bad, partly because I have actually had this out already. Gave it a little bit of a clean up while it was out. So Yeah, it looks relatively clean and tidy, but having a bit of a look underneath here, can see the bottom of the gearbox there, that's underneath the front diff. We've actually got a little bit of oil coming through, so there must still be a leak in there somewhere. I'll track that down once we've got the engine and gearbox out. But yeah, the engine itself and stuff is all looking pretty good. I'm going to have the front part of the exhaust here, so these headers and stuff, they're all going to have to come out along with the O2 sensors. They're needed for emissions and to get the car legal on the road. But looking underneath here, for a high mileage Outback, chassis rails and everything are all actually in pretty good condition. A little bit of surface rust on the exhaust and stuff, you can see down through here and things. Potentially it's been down the beach a few times in its life, it wouldn't surprise me. Diff, again, a little bit crusty, but not in too bad a condition, doesn't seem to be leaking or anything. Brakes and everything, we're going to have to take all of those off. I'll salvage the drive shafts and stuff, they'll no doubt need to be shortened, but we'll take those out while we're at it. And yeah, anything else that we can have while we're at it. But all in all, not a bad donor vehicle.
Given the surface rust under here, a little bit of penetrating oil is probably going to be my best friend when it comes to getting some of these bolts off. So while the coolant drains, a bit of CRC on the bolts, then the exhaust can come off, and then I can move on to disconnecting everything in the engine bay, which is not going to be overly interesting. So I'll crack on with that in the background, and let's jump across and I'll give you the backstory on the donor vehicle.
Okay, so here we are in the mighty outhouse. Just to give you a little bit of a rundown, I purchased this a couple of years ago.
Getting ahead of myself. We actually need to go back about another 3 years. So let's pause this here, rewind back to February 2023.
Okay, so I'm sitting at the airport waiting to board a flight down to Wellington. I have purchased a car that I'm going to pick up. It's the cheapest Subaru Outback I could find on Trade Me. Done a bunch of Ks, got a few bolts and stuff, but it's a good sturdy basis for this project I'm going to do. So heading down there today to go and pick it up. And drive it. It's about 4.5 hours to get it back home from Wellington. Having purchased it sight unseen and without any sort of inspection of the car, a little bit nervous about what it's going to be like, but I've got a backpack full of tools, and you know, what's the worst that can happen? Do have to get it home today. Tomorrow is a cyclone coming in, and I sort of want to make sure that we get back home and get the car safely back in the garage before that cyclone hits, but wish me luck.
The seller was kind enough to pick me up from the airport, so after doing the transaction and dropping him off home, I hit the road to head back up to Hawke's Bay. And first impressions of the car were really good actually. It drove really nicely and was very, very comfortable on the 4.5 hour drive home. So let's come back to more recent times and find out if those first impressions proved to be accurate.
Just to give you a little bit of a rundown, I purchased this a couple of years ago specifically for getting the engine and gearbox out of it and putting it into the little Brumby. The appealing thing about this particular one was that it has the 2.5 litre naturally aspirated single overhead cam engine, which should go into the Brumby without me having to modify the chassis rails in the Brumby, which makes life a lot easier in terms of getting it suited for driving on the road here in New Zealand. This one is a manual, and it's quite a good one. It's got, apart from the fact it shifts nicely, it's got the 5-speed with the dual range transmission, so it actually has a low ratio, and it's got a viscous centre differential, which will help with off-roading. So that combination was what I wanted, and this happened to be the cheapest outhouse available at the time. I paid about 1,700 New Zealand dollars for it, and the reason why it was the cheapest was, apart from the fact that it's a little bit rough, hence the nickname of the outhouse, because it's a little bit of a shitbox if we're being honest. It's also done, or at the time it had done around 300,000 Ks, and the cam belt hadn't been done for 300,000 Ks, so that puts a lot of people off. I'm not worried about that. I've done a few cam belts on these engines, or on Subaru engines. It's actually not that difficult, and on a single overhead cam it's not actually overly expensive either.
Okay, back in the shed, looks like the engine is just about free. While I roll in the back saving device to yank that bad boy out, let's celebrate by giving the mighty outhouse the beans one last time.
We're going to do a 0 to 100 test in the mighty outhouse, so let's just see what she will do. Well,
cooked a little bit. There's 100k an hour. Okay, so I can tell you the quarter mile speed was a 16.65. I'll flash them up on the screen for you so that you can see what they were. And that little bit of scientific research was naturally carried out under proper supervision on a fully closed road somewhere in the heart of Mexico. Anyway, back to the shed. Okay, that seemed to be pretty successful really. That went smoother than I thought it would. You can see we have a nice engine shaped hole in the engine bay of the Outback, and it has successfully given birth to an EJ25. I have had this engine out before. When I brought the Outback a couple of years ago, it actually had blown head gaskets, so it was still drivable, though just leaking oil and making a bit of a mess. The clutch was also on its way out, so a little while ago pulled the engine out, had the heads machined, replaced the gaskets with multi-layer steel ones, which supposedly solved that well-known Subaru problem of blowing head gaskets. While I had it out, I did the timing belt, water pump, all that sort of stuff, replaced the clutch with a brand new Exceedy or Exedy, however it's pronounced. Also painted quite a few pieces, cleaned up all the spilt oil obviously, as well as painting the intake, doing a lot of the pipes, brackets, bits and pieces, just to tidy it up, knowing that I was going to be keeping it for quite a while. So that basically is ready to go in the Brumby now, which is brilliant. Now the Outback still has a bit to give. I've still got a few bits to strip off it. Obviously, the gearbox still needs to come out. I decided to do that separate to the engine. Potentially I could have kept them joined and dropped them down the bottom, dropping out the subframes. I don't really have anything sturdy enough to put them on, which was one of the deciding factors, but also I'm quite familiar with this method of taking the engine and gearbox out separately. So I thought for me, on my own, it's probably going to be a bit more manageable to do it this way. Other than the gearbox, there's a whole heap more that the Outback can still give us. Obviously wiring looms, ECU, all that sort of stuff, brakes, rear diff. There's a lot I'm going to strip out of it before the shell goes off to the wreckers. But it's been a great car. It's kind of sad that it's come to the end of the road, but so it's a little bit mixed emotions. But yeah, it's all for a good cause, because that engine is going in that Brumby and I can't wait. Coming up on the next episode in the Brumby build series, I share some technical information, because that's good for skids. Show what I've achieved so far. Well, the short answer is it's a mess. Do some stripping. The other camera's got nothing in it but a view of my butt. Make some spaghetti. Yeah, see all these wires? This is insane. And I introduce my apprentice. There's my boy. So make sure you hang around as I go on a mission to harvest more parts.